A confident black woman walks into a bank and walks out with her dignity bruised, but her fire ignited. What happens when they underestimate the wrong one? Let us know in the comments section below. Kate Benson didn't flinch when the receptionist gave her that look. The kind that lasted half a second too long. The kind that asked without words, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" She straightened the cuffs of her navy blue blazer, smoothed the pleat of her pencil skirt, and smiled like she owned the building. Because one day she would. She clutched a black leather portfolio to her chest, her fingers brushing the corner of the glossy business plan she'd revised 17 times. It was clean, perfect. Numbers, market research, projections, community impact, every box checked. She hadn't slept much the night before, but adrenaline lit her up better than caffeine ever could. This was the day. Inside the office, the man waiting behind the desk didn't look up when she entered. Gerald Thompson, white shirt, red tie, and a permanent scowl like someone had personally offended him years ago and he never quite got over it. He finally lifted his gaze when the door clicked shut behind her. "Miss Benson, was it?" "Yes, sir. Kate Benson. Thank you for your time today." He didn't respond to that. Just pointed toward the chair like she was late, though she was 5 minutes early. She sat, crossing her legs and placing the portfolio squarely on the desk. "I appreciate the opportunity to—" "We'll keep this brief," he cut in, flipping open her business plan with 2 fingers like it might stain his hands. "You're asking for how much?" "Over 125,000. He whistled, low and long, and didn't bother hiding the smirk. "You run a business now." "I operate a small online boutique and host quarterly pop-up markets," Kate answered. "We've been in the black for 9 straight quarters, and we have a growing customer base across 3 cities. With no storefront? Not yet. That's what this loan would help us achieve. Our first flagship store in Bronzeville, with space for local artisans, and it's too risky." The words landed with the weight of a gavel. Just like that. No questions about her cash flow, no curiosity about her expansion model or the community partnerships she'd secured. Just no. Kay didn't blink. She'd expected resistance. She just hadn't expected indifference. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, I think if you looked at—" "It's not personal," he said, lifting one hand like he was shooing away her passion. "It's policy. No physical collateral, no green light." "That's the game." Kate leaned forward, her voice steady. "So, if I had a brick or a deed, you'd consider this? Even with the consistent revenue I've proven?" "Consistency isn't security," he said. "And frankly, retail by minority entrepreneurs is a volatile market right now." There it was. Not said outright, but as clear as if he'd just read it from a cue card. "People like you." Kate stood, gracefully, deliberately. She closed the portfolio, her face unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. Gerald Thompson didn't flinch. He didn't think she was worth it. Nobody would. She turned without another word and left the office with the same straight spine she entered with. Outside, she passed the receptionist. Same look, same thin smile. The air felt different, cold in the way rejection always feels. Still, she pressed her thumb into the corner of her planner and flipped open the notes she'd scribbled last night. Backup ideas, Plan B, Plan C, hustle. Kate Benson didn't grow up with safety nets. She grew up watching her mom stretch grocery money into meals, learning how to flip a yard sale find into a rent check. Failure wasn't the end. It was the last. As she stepped into the sunlight, her phone buzzed. A message from Maya, her younger sister. "How'd it go? Tell me you got it." Kate typed fast. "No loan, but I'm good. Just got some clarity." Because clarity was fuel. And today she was running hot. By the time she made it back to her apartment, One bedroom above a nail salon, windows that rattled when the trains passed. Kate was already pulling up spreadsheets, reworking numbers, flipping the pitch from investors to direct-to-consumer subscription models, looking at what she could sell now, what she could make next, what she could risk. She posted a photo of her workspace, mood boards, sketches, fabric swatches, captioned, "Still betting on myself." Within 10 minutes, 20 likes. Within an hour, 3 DMs asking when her next collection dropped. By midnight, she'd made her first sale of the week. Kate clicked refresh. Again. Watch the orders crawl up. She whispered to herself, not for motivation, but for memory. The depression. They told me no. I said watch. And that was the beginning. Kate didn't sleep that night. Not really. She closed her eyes around 2 a.m., but her mind didn't shut off. Numbers danced behind her eyelids, names, ideas, faces. The look on that lone officer's face. By 5:47 a.m. she was dressed again. Same blazer from yesterday, different blouse. Her hands moved on autopilot as she brewed coffee and poured it into the thermos with the chipped lid. She didn't need caffeine. What she needed was momentum. And she was going to make it herself. She opened her laptop and started a Google Doc titled, "Build Without Them." It was blank for half a second before her fingers started flying. Business model tweaks. Funding through community circles, crowdfunding, pre-orders, pop-up collaborations, a pay-what-you-can line, micro-investments through local black-owned co-ops. All the things she'd been told were too small to scale. She called Maya before the sun was up. Her sister didn't answer right away, probably still asleep, but 5 minutes later the phone rang back. "Didn't think I'd hear from you until lunchtime," Maya said, her voice groggy. Kate smiled faintly. "You know me, got an early fire." "Girl, did you ever sleep?" "Nope. But listen, I have an idea." She laid it out in pieces, letting Maya ask questions as she poured her heart into every syllable. She was done asking for permission, done standing in rooms where people didn't see her. She'd build her own table if she had to cut down the wood herself. Maya paused, then let out a soft laugh. "You sound dangerous right now." "Good," Kate replied. "Let's make them nervous." 2 weeks later, she was running 2 side hustles out of her apartment and renting weekend booth space at the South Loop Market. Her living room looked like a textile factory exploded. Bolts of fabric, buckets of dyed canvas, stacks of handmade candles and jewelry from other local creators she partnered with. She called it Collective Thread. The pop-ups weren't fancy, folding tables, borrowed tents, portable card readers. But the foot traffic was solid and the vibe was undeniable. Customers didn't just buy, they lingered. They took photos, they shared, word of mouth bloomed like dandelions. One Saturday, an older woman in a brown linen shawl paused at Kate's table, fingering a beaded necklace. "She is yours?" she asked. "Some of them. I also work with a group of other women, mostly local. We split profits." The woman smiled. "Community before capital. That's rare." Kate just nodded. She didn't need to explain. People like this woman understood. She didn't ask for a discount. She paid full price, in cash, and left with 3 items. That same day, Kate noticed a couple standing across the aisle from her booth, whispering. At first she thought nothing of it, but then the man pulled out a camera and pointed it in her direction. Not the booth, not the products. Her. She took a step back and turned slightly, pretending to reorganize bracelets. When she looked up again, they were gone. Weird. But not her first weird. A week later, she got a DM from a guy named Raymond Miles. He said he was an independent investor who focused on emerging brands in urban communities. "Saw you at South Loop, watched you sell out in an hour. We should talk." Kate didn't reply. She clicked his profile. It was real. Clean, professional, articles, case studies, a TEDx talk titled "Neighborhoods as Economic Engines." She watched 3 minutes, then shut it off. She didn't trust fast hands, even if they were offering money. 3 days later, she got another message. "Not trying to buy you, just want to listen, no pitch. Coffee?" This time she said yes. Mostly because Maya told her she should stop pushing everyone away just because Gerald Thompson had been a jerk. They met at a cafe that looked like it doubled as a student union. Raymond wore dark-rimmed glasses, no tie, sleeves rolled up. He didn't start with a question. He started with this. "You remind me of my aunt. She sold fruit cups out of a cooler for 5 years and bought her first building with cash." Kate didn't smile. She just nodded once. Coolers build empires. They're due. He didn't try to sell her anything. He just asked how her systems worked, what her goals were, what she was trying to avoid, what she was scared of. She surprised herself with how honest she was. "I'm scared I'll grow just enough to get noticed and then get crushed by someone bigger before I even get stable. I'm scared people will want the brand but not the mission. I'm scared of turning into the kind of company I hate." Raymond folded his arms, listening. "You want to grow slow and strong?" "Exactly." "Then don't take outside money." Kate blinked. "Aren't you an investor?" "I am. But smart investors know when to back off." "You're still growing your spine. Don't let anyone interrupt that." He stood up and slid his card across the table. "When you're ready to build a skeleton around your vision, call me. Until then, I'm just a guy who buys coffee." Kate left that cafe walking taller, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone in this climb. That night she printed a new flyer. Same name, new tagline. "Collective thread. Owned by us. Built for us." It hung above her booth the next morning like a flag. And when she looked across the crowd and saw the woman in the brown shawl again, this time bringing a friend, Kate knew something bigger had started. Not just a brand, not just a hustle. A movement. Kate Benson sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, receipts fanned around her like fallen leaves. Her eyes burned, her knees ached, and the Wi-Fi had gone out again. But her Shopify dashboard blinked with life. New orders, new customers, new hope. Still, hope didn't pay vendors, and this latest batch of wholesale fabric had doubled in price overnight. Maya was kneeling beside her, sorting paper invoices by color, coating them with sticky tabs. "This is wild," she whispered, holding up one paper with a total that made her eyebrows jump. "You really pulled this off." "I haven't pulled it off," Kate muttered. "I'm holding it together with duct tape and prayers." But she was growing. That was the problem, and the blessing. She had too many orders and not enough space, not enough hands. The community wanted more of what she had to offer, and she wanted to give it. But the ceiling over her head, quite literally, was starting to crack. When she started Collective Thread, it was a side hustle, an act of resistance wrapped in fabric and fire. Now it was evolving into something more permanent, more demanding. She'd already outgrown her storage closet. Her hallway doubled as a packing station, and the heat in the unit had stopped working consistently, which meant her early morning work sessions were done wrapped in scarves and wool socks. But Kate wasn't about to slow down, not now. That week, a blogger from the local Tribune posted a feature on her and called her a visionary merchant of soul-rooted entrepreneurship. The article included a photo of her standing in front of her pop-up booth, laughing mid-conversation, eyes crinkled, palms open. It caught her off guard how much she looked like her mother in that photo. Bold, bright, unafraid. Kate printed it out and taped it next to her bathroom mirror. 2 days later, her inbox blew up. The post went semi-viral, especially in small business circles. Invitations poured in, from partnerships to vendor showcases to something called the Chicago Women's Wealth Collective. She didn't know what that last one was, but she'd saved it to review later. Right now, she had bigger problems. Rent was about to increase. Her current production pace couldn't keep up with demand, and her bank account, while no longer empty, was dangerously lean for what was coming. She reached out to her vendors and tried negotiating payment plans. Some worked with her, some didn't. She sold off her old furniture on Facebook Marketplace, took freelance gigs designing other people's product packaging, even drove for rideshare on weekends just to cover gaps. Still, it wasn't enough. One night she broke down crying over a broken shipping label printer. She'd been trying to fix it for 2 hours. Her hands were sore, her head was pounding, and when the label printed upside down and off-center for the 5th time, she slammed her fists on the counter and burst into tears. Not delicate ones, the ugly kind, the kind that rack your chest and force you to sit down because standing feels like too much. She didn't realize Maya had walked in until she felt arms wrap around her shoulders from behind. "It's okay to fall apart for a second," Maya whispered. "You're doing too much." Kate laughed bitterly through her tears. "I'm not doing enough. That's the problem. You are. You just can't see it because you're in it." They sat on the floor again. Same floor, same cramped apartment, but everything felt different now. Kate looked at the walls and wondered how she had once thought this place would be enough for her dreams. The next morning, she opened her email and saw a message she'd forgotten about. Chicago Women's Wealth Collective, open application, invitation. She clicked it. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't a VC firm. It was a network of women, mostly women of color, pooling resources, mentorship, and capital to fund each other's ideas. The buy-in wasn't money. It was participation, monthly meetings, shared strategies, collective decision-making on how to fund new ventures, no gatekeepers. She stared at the screen for 10 minutes before starting the application. They asked questions that banks never did. What's your vision for your community? What do you want this business to feel like 10 years from now? Who does your success pull forward with you? Kate answered every question like her life depended on it. Because it did. 2 weeks later, she got the call. They loved her pitch, they loved her energy, and more than anything, they loved her refusal to play small. "You're not just a vendor," said one of the board members. "You're a blueprint." Kate blinked back tears. She thought of Gerald Thompson. She thought of the front desk receptionist and her tilted smile. She thought of all the people who would never see her name coming. A week after joining the collective, she signed her first short-term lease for a storefront. It wasn't on a main strip, it wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. A narrow unit with tall ceilings and exposed brick, right off 63rd and Langley. The place smelled like dust and potential. On her first night inside, she lay on the concrete floor and looked up at the rafters. No furniture, no shelves, no racks. Just space. Kate whispered to herself, "They're gonna see it now." The next morning, she bought a cheap speaker and blasted Solange while she swept. Neighbors peeked inside. Curious, supportive. And slowly, people started dropping in. First for a chat, then for a preview, then for pre-orders, and then, finally, for opening day. She hosted it like a block party. Food, music, poetry. No stiff ribbon cutting, just joy, just root. Raymond showed up that day too. He leaned against the wall in his same rolled sleeves, sipping lemonade and nodding at the crowd. "You made it," he said. Kate smiled. "Nah, I just started." He grinned. "Now you're ready for something bigger." She looked around. The walls weren't empty anymore. They held dreams now. And she wasn't afraid of dreaming bigger anymore. Kate Benson stood at the front window of her shop, her fingers lightly touching the cool glass. A line had already started forming down the block. Teenagers, elders, artists, mothers with strollers, neighbors who used to walk past her table at the market and now proudly said, "I knew her when." The store wasn't just open, it was thriving. Her walls were filled with color and culture. Shelves lined with handmade goods and framed letters from young girls who said they wanted to be bosses like Miss Kate. And yet, on this morning, Kate wasn't thinking about the store. She was thinking about a bank. Specifically, she was thinking about a building on Wabash Avenue with columns out front and a name carved in stone. The same bank where Gerald Thompson once sat behind a glass desk and looked through her like air. Only now, that building was up for sale, and Kate wasn't window shopping. It had started as a whisper in a collective meeting, a passing mention. "Old money's pulling out," someone had said. "That building's going to be on the market soon. Would be poetic if someone bought it." Poetic didn't begin to cover it. Kate had stayed quiet during the meeting, but the seed had been planted, and as it grew, she kept coming back to the same feeling, not revenge, but reclamation. Weeks later, she made her first move. She didn't tell Maya, didn't post about it, just gathered her numbers, made her calls, and looped in Raymond after a long silence. He listened carefully when she told him the plan. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm ready," she replied. "Good," he said, his tone sharpening into business. "Then we move fast." It wasn't easy. The building had red tape and layers of hidden issues. Permits, liens, historical designations. But Kate wasn't the girl with the folding table anymore. She had a team now. Lawyers, planners, advisors who were just as invested in her victory as she was. Some had been shut out of banks like that too. Some had worked inside them. Now they all moved with the quiet urgency of people who had something to prove, not to the world, but to their younger selves. When her offer was accepted, she sat in silence for a long time. No music, no noise, just her and a contract. She thought of her mother, who'd once braided Kate's hair before school and told her, "You don't have to make them like you, baby. Just make sure they can't ignore you." They couldn't ignore her now. Not when her name was on the papers. Not when her hands, steady and unshaking, signed across the line that made it official. Kate Benson was now the owner of the same bank that had once told her she didn't belong. The takeover wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She didn't fire off press releases or throw confetti. Instead, she held a quiet event in the building's old lobby. She invited families, local artists, former small business owners who once had their dreams cut short by places like this. And she gave the building a new name, The Forge. A place where ideas could be shaped, built, strengthened under pressure. No more marble floors and velvet ropes. She brought in muralists, changed the telewindows into grant desks, installed a lending library in the back with books on business, money, legacy, and in the office where Gerald Thompson once sat, she put a photo on the desk, not of herself, not of her mother, standing outside the old laundromat where she'd worked double shifts for years, because Kate knew she didn't get here alone. That day, as the crowd buzzed and kids laughed in corners once roped off by brass dividers, Maya stood beside her, with tears in her eyes. "I wish Mama was here," Maya whispered. Kate smiled and nodded. "She is." She wasn't done building, not by a long shot. The Forge became a hub, part business incubator, part storytelling center. Each quarter, they funded 10 small ventures with zero-interest microloans. The only requirement? When you made it, you came back to teach. They came back and brought others with them. 1 year later, a national magazine ran a story, From Denial to Dynasty, how Kate Benson flipped the system that rejected her. Kate didn't read the article until weeks after it dropped. When she finally did, she closed her laptop halfway through and laughed. They called it a rags to riches tale. They had no idea. This wasn't about riches. This was about power, about presence, about staying. Few months later, Gerald Thompson passed by the forge while walking his dog. He looked older, slighter, a stranger in his own old kingdom. He paused at the window, peering in. Kate stood just inside, talking with a young boy and his father about how to register a business name. She saw him and nodded. No smirk, no smugness, just acknowledgement. He walked away. She went back to her conversation. The next week, that same boy came in with his new logo sketch. She printed it for him on the house. By year 3, the forge had helped launch 64 businesses. 10 of them occupied storefronts on the same streets that once felt closed off to people like her. Kate stood on the roof of the building one evening, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. Her phone buzzed. A text from Raymond. "Remember when you said you were scared of turning into the kind of company you hate?" She replied, "Still am. That's why I stay close to the ground." And she did. Even when the world started calling her the empire builder. Even when the national banks asked for partnership talks. Even when her name was listed on the top 40 entrepreneurs under 40, Kate stayed close. Close to the mission, close to the people, close to the fire that built her. Because now she knew, you don't just build for yourself. You build so no one else has to beg at locked doors again. You build until they open without knocking. And Kate Benson, she never knocked twice.